Have you ever been in a conversation where, even though you try to stay calm and speak logically, the other person still controlled the entire atmosphere? Maybe they kept interrupting you, speaking louder, twisting your words, or making the conversation feel so tense that eventually you did not even want to say anything anymore. And then later that night, you replayed everything in your mind, remembering all the things you wish you had said. Not because you wanted to win, but because deep down, you simply wanted to protect your self-respect. Most people react emotionally in situations like this. They rush to defend themselves. They speak before they have time to think. Or they stay silent while feeling frustrated and powerless. But emotionally intelligent people respond differently. They understand that real strength does not come from overpowering others. It comes from the ability to maintain clarity, calmness, and steadiness even under pressure. Today, I'm going to share with you 5 calm responses that can help you stay grounded in difficult conversations. Not to shame the other person, not to control them, but to help you. Protect your peace, communicate with confidence, and stop letting tense conversations pull you so easily out of your calm. And response number 3 may completely change the way you handle disrespect from now on. Stay until the end of the video, because these sentences are not just simple replies. They are emotional boundaries. Perhaps there is no moment when calmness becomes more visible than when someone tries to pull you into an argument. When emotions begin to rise, most people react immediately. But a truly calm person understands that. They do not need to respond with the same energy. Some people believe that the louder they talk, the more likely they are to make others listen. They interrupt, talk over people, keep raising their voice, and slowly turn a normal conversation into an emotional battle. It is no longer about understanding each other. It becomes about who can overpower who. In situations like that, most people easily react on instinct. They start talking louder too, explaining more, defending themselves more. And the harder they try to prove their side is right, the more easily they lose their calm. And that is completely normal. Because when we feel pressured, everyone wants to be heard. Everyone wants to be respected. Everyone wants others to understand that they are not wrong. But truly calm people understand something different. If you step into the same chaos as them, you also begin losing control of yourself. And when you can no longer control yourself, the conversation no longer stays in a place of clarity. That is why this response carries so much weight. I don't need to raise my voice to prove I'm right. This sentence does not insult anyone. It does not attack anyone. And it does not make the tension worse. It simply says gently, you will not take part in a conversation through a lack of calm. Imagine saying that slowly, while the other person is still raising their voice. In that moment, the atmosphere begins to change. Not because you are trying to embarrass them, but because the contrast becomes very clear. One person is being pulled by their emotions. The other is still holding their calm. And sometimes, that calmness is exactly what gives your words more weight. Marcus Aurelius reminded us that what we can truly control is not how other people behave, but how we respond to it. In other words, real strength is not found in reacting more aggressively than someone else. It is found in the ability to stay clear-minded, even when someone is trying to pull you into their tension. When you stay calm under pressure, people begin to listen to you in a different way. Not because you are louder, but because you no longer let your emotions speak for you. And deep down, people can always feel the difference between someone who is truly confident and someone who is only trying to win by being louder. But disrespect does not always come from someone raising their voice. Sometimes it comes through words that make you feel dismissed or deeply hurt. And in moments like that, calm people remember something very important. Many people believe that during an argument, whoever speaks more sharply, whoever makes the other person more uncomfortable, whoever makes the other person go silent first, is the stronger one. But the truth is, a mature person does not need to hurt someone else just to prove they are right. Some people, when they disagree, do not stay with the issue. They become sarcastic. They mock. They say things that make the other person feel small, or they turn a normal conversation into a place where they release the frustration inside them. That does not make them stronger. It only shows that inside, they are not truly calm. And when someone speaks to us that way, most people react immediately. They want to defend themselves. They want to respond back. They want to prove that they do not deserve to be treated like that. And that is completely understandable, because no one wants to be looked down on. No one wants to be spoken to with disrespect, and no one wants to stay silent when their heart feels hurt. But calm people understand something very important. Not every hurtful word deserves to take away your calm. Not every disrespectful attitude needs to be answered with another disrespectful attitude. That is why this response has so much value. The way you speak says more about you than it does about me. This sentence acts like a mirror. You do not attack back. You do not become sarcastic back. You do not try to embarrass the other person. You simply return the issue to where it truly belongs. Because the way a person speaks often says a lot about their inner state. A calm person does not need to use insults to win. A confident person does not need to lower others to feel higher. And a truly mature person understands that disagreement does not give anyone permission to lose respect. Epictetus once reminded us that if someone can easily make you angry, they have reached a part of you that is not yet fully steady. That does not mean you need to blame yourself. It simply reminds you to return to self-control. The moment you stop reacting emotionally, disrespectful words can no longer pull you away as easily as before. You begin to realize that you do not need to become bitter just because someone else is behaving that way. You do not need to lose your kindness just to respond to an unkind word. And you do not need to let the way someone speaks to you decide the kind of person you will become. That is a very quiet form of strength. Not needing to win through harsh words. Not needing to make anyone feel ashamed. Just being calm enough not to become the same version of what once hurt you. But staying calm does not mean you have to remain in a conversation where respect is no longer present. Sometimes, the right thing to do is not to keep arguing, but to make it clear that this conversation should only continue when we can both speak to each other with respect. Some conversations can still continue, but only when both people are still able to hold respect for each other. Because if a conversation is only filled with interruption, raised voices, sarcasm, or trying to make the other person feel wrong in every possible way, then at that point, it is no longer truly a conversation. It begins to become an emotional battle. And in a battle like that, the calmer person is often the one who needs to pause first. Not because they are weaker, but because they are aware enough to recognize this. If we continue in this state, no real understanding will appear. There will only be more hurt, more heavy words, and more things that both people may regret later. Many people stay too long in conversations like this, not because they want to argue, but because they hope the other person will calm down. They hope that if they say just a little more, the other person will understand. They hope that if they explain long enough, everything will finally become clear. And that is completely normal, because everyone wants to be heard. Everyone wants the truth to be seen. Everyone wants their heart to be understood correctly. But sometimes, the more you try to speak in an atmosphere without respect, the more you begin to lose your own calm. That is why this response matters so much. We can continue this conversation when we are both able to stay respectful. This sentence does not close the door to communication. It simply sets a very clear condition. That you are still willing to talk. You are still willing to listen. You still do not want to turn everything into a battle. But you also do not accept continuing when respect is no longer there. And that is a very important difference. You are not walking away in anger. You are not trying to embarrass the other person. You are not saying that you are right and they are wrong. You are simply saying, gently, if we want to continue, we need to return to respect first. And that changes the conversation. Because at that point, the issue is no longer who can speak louder. It is no longer about who wins. It is no longer about who can make the other person go silent. It becomes this: are we still calm enough to speak to each other like two people who respect one another? Seneca once reminded us that the best way to calm anger is sometimes to give it more time. And that is very true in real life. Not everything needs to be solved while emotions are high. Not every sentence needs an immediate response. Not every conversation becomes better just because it lasts longer. Sometimes a pause is what protects respect. Silence helps you avoid saying something too heavy. Distance helps both people see more clearly what they truly want to say. And calmness gives a conversation the chance to become a real conversation again. So when you say, we can continue this conversation when we are both able to stay respectful, you are not running away. You are protecting your dignity. You are protecting your peace. And sometimes, you are also protecting the conversation itself from becoming something both people may regret later. However, not every conversation becomes better simply because you give it more time. Sometimes, the other person is no longer truly willing to listen. They only want to keep arguing, keep hurting you, or keep pulling you away from your calm. And when that happens, you have the right to stop.
There are moments when a conversation no longer helps anyone understand each other better. It only makes you more tired, heavier inside, and the longer you keep talking, the more you feel yourself drifting away from your own calm. That is a very important sign, but many people often ignore that sign. They keep staying, keep explaining, keep trying to make things clear, keep hoping that if they just say a little more, the other person will finally understand. And that is completely normal. Because when we feel misunderstood, we naturally want to explain ourselves. When we feel treated unfairly, we naturally want to be seen correctly. And when our self-respect feels touched, it becomes very easy to stay and defend ourselves. But there is a truth: emotionally mature people slowly learn. Not everyone enters a conversation to understand you. Some people only want to win. Some people only want to pull you into their emotions. Some people only want you to react so they can say you are the one who lost control. And if you stay in that kind of conversation for too long, you begin losing your energy. Not in one big moment, but little by little. Through every explanation, every attempt to stay calm, every time you wonder, why do they still not understand? That is why this response is so necessary. I think this conversation should stop here. This sentence is very simple, but it carries weight. Because it does not ask for permission. It does not continue the argument. It does not try to prove who is right or wrong. It simply says, I have realized this conversation is no longer healthy, and I am choosing to stop before it takes too much of my peace. The important thing is, you do not need to say this with anger. You do not need to be cold. You do not need to make the other person feel small. You only need to say it with calmness, clearly, and respectfully enough. Because leaving a conversation that is no longer healthy is not losing. Sometimes it is how you protect the best part of yourself before emotion makes you say something you may later regret. Marcus Aurelius reminded us that what we can control is not everything that happens outside of us, but how we hold our mind within. And in some moments, the strongest form of self-control is not saying more. It is knowing when to stop. Not every conversation needs to continue until the end. Not every misunderstanding can be solved in one conversation. And not every person is calm enough to truly listen to you. So when you say, I think this conversation should stop here, you are not giving up. You are choosing clarity. You are protecting your dignity. And you are reminding yourself that your peace should not be traded away just to win an argument. But not every difficult conversation needs to end. Sometimes the person in front of you is not attacking you at all. They simply have a different perspective, a different choice, or a different way of looking at life. And in situations like that, calmness needs to be expressed in a different way. Not every difficult conversation begins with disrespect. Sometimes it comes from people who are very close to you, family, friends, co-workers, or someone you truly love. They may not have bad intentions. They may genuinely believe they know what is best for you. They want you to think like them, choose like them, live in the way they believe is right. And if you do not agree, they may feel like you are going against them. In situations like that, many people choose to stay silent and let it pass. Not because they truly agree, but because they are too tired of explaining their thoughts again and again. Some people give in. Some people try to please others. Some people slowly give up their own voice just to keep everything peaceful. And that is completely understandable, because no one wants to make someone they love feel hurt. No one wants a normal conversation to turn into an argument. And no one wants to be seen as selfish just because they think differently. But emotionally mature people understand something very important. Respecting other people does not mean losing yourself.
You can listen calmly. You can understand why they think that way. You can respect their right to have their own perspective. But that does not mean you have to give up your own. That is why this response has so much value. That is your perspective, and I respect that. But I do not see it the same way. This sentence does not attack anyone. It does not put anyone down. And it does not try to win. It simply says, gently, I heard you. I respect the way you see this situation. But I still have the right to hold my own thoughts. And that takes a lot of steadiness. Because many people spend their whole lives trying to meet the expectations around them. They are afraid of being judged, afraid of disappointing others, afraid that if they think differently, they will become distant from the people they care about. But if you keep changing yourself, just to keep other people satisfied, then little by little, you may no longer know what you truly want. Seneca once reminded us that if you try to belong everywhere, you will never truly belong anywhere. That does not mean you have to be stubborn. And it does not mean you stop listening to others. It means you need to learn how to stand steady, even when other people do not agree with you. You can still be kind. You can still be gentle. You can still remain respectful. But you do not need to lose your own voice. And when you become calm enough to do that, your confidence begins to feel very different. Not loud, not rebellious, not trying too hard to prove anything. Just the quiet steadiness of someone who has begun to understand what they think, what they choose, and why they no longer need someone else's approval to feel that it has value. These 5 responses may sound very simple, but behind each one is the same lesson. You can protect your self-respect without losing your calm. You can keep your boundaries without becoming bitter. And you can be strong while still holding on to the kindness within you. The 5 responses from today are not meant to turn you into a colder person. And they are not meant to help you win every argument. They are meant to remind you of something very important. You do not need to lose your calm just because someone else cannot keep theirs. You do not need to speak louder just to prove that you have value. You do not need to respond with hurt just because someone spoke to you in an unkind way. And you do not need to stay in every conversation just hoping that someone who does not want to understand you will finally understand. People who are truly emotionally mature are not people who never feel sad. They are not people who never feel angry. And they are not people who always react perfectly. They are still human. They still feel pain. They still get tired. They still get hurt. They still have moments when a part of them deeply wants to say something back. But the difference is, they learn how to pause before they react. They learn to ask themselves, is this really worth losing my peace over? Does this sentence truly need a response? Is there still respect in this conversation? And if I continue, am I becoming someone I may later regret? That is where real strength begins. Not in controlling other people, but in no longer allowing others to easily control your emotions. Not in making someone else go silent, but in keeping your dignity, even when the conversation becomes difficult. The Stoics understood this deeply. Calmness is not weakness. Kindness is not submission, and silence does not always mean losing. Sometimes it is how a person protects the best part within themselves, protects their clarity, protects their self-respect, protects their peace, and even protects their relationships from words spoken when emotions are out of control. So when you learn to respond with more calm, you do not only change the way others see you, you also change the way you see yourself. You begin to believe that you do not need to react to everything. You do not need to prove yourself to everyone. You do not need to win every conversation. You simply need to be calm enough not to lose yourself, clear enough to know when to speak, grounded enough to know when to stop, and kind enough that even after being hurt, you still do not allow that pain to turn you into someone bitter. That is real strength. Not loud, not harsh, and not needing to hurt anyone, just to prove you are strong. Real strength is when you can still keep your calm, still keep your self-respect, and still choose to act with kindness, even when a part of you deeply wants to respond.
If this video resonated with you, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. This channel is not about becoming colder, and it is not about learning how to win every argument. It is about learning together how to live with more calm, more clarity, more kindness, and more steadiness, even when life places you in difficult situations. If you remember only one thing today, remember this: you do not need to lose your calm just to prove that you are right. You do not need to speak louder just to be respected. And you do not need to become bitter just because someone was not kind to you. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is not to react quickly. It is to pause for a moment, keep your heart calm, and choose a response that you will not regret later. And before you leave, I want to ask you something. In your opinion, what helps a person stay calm when they are being disrespected? Is it self-control? Is it self-respect? Or is it because they no longer want to lose themselves inside someone else's emotions? Leave your thoughts below. I truly want to hear your perspective. See you in the next video.